Hey everybody, welcome to Electric Liberty Land 198's pre-roll, where I want to remind you to check out our buddy Brad Tracy and his amazing blog, The Liberty Theorist. Now, it's on Medium, which means you have to use the weird medium.com/@Liberty Theorist, and you're going to find yourself a fantastic amount of content from a Rothbardian libertarian, covering everything from JFK through to from Mockingbird. I like this one. From Mockingbird to murder, how a doomed love triangle might provide insight into JFK's murder. He really likes a lot of the JFK stuff. Also an article, I Held Kennedy's Brain. A lot of great stuff. So check this out. It's a fun read and one that I think you're going to go back again and again and again to. He's got a lot of content on here. So again, check that out. Medium.com/@Liberty Theorist. Not only that, but Brad's also got a podcast, the Scarif Scuttlebutt, where he's talking Star Wars and all that jazz. So check him out, check us out, and now here's the show.
Welcome to Electric Liberty Land, here on the Lions of Liberty podcast, your weekly shot of culture, comedy, and liberty with your host, Brian McWilliams.
So ready to rock?
Yep, let's do it. Remind me, are we doing video too or just audio?
Typically I'll just do audio. I mean, what I might do is just for our Patreon subscribers. Sometimes I'll throw video up for it, but
okay.
I mean, it doesn't really matter to me.
All right. I've had, so I did like at least one where I forgot that they were doing video, and I was just like, looking around, like, yeah.
Just doing wank off motion.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Great question, Brian. Yeah.
See, it feels like I'm just gonna go cold in. This is a great cold open. Just talking wank off motions into the show. It's very much in line with my brand on here in Electric Liberty Land. So, guys, this is Justin Tosi. He's with me. He is an assistant professor at Arizona State. And nope, did I get that wrong?
Texas Tech.
Oh God, no! I'm sorry. I'm confusing where you went to school and met your co-author. Sorry, assistant professor at Texas Tech. My right. Apologies. But you and Brandon Warmke, your co-author on Grandstanding, the use and abuse of moral talk, had met. And this is the second time that Justin and I are talking, because the first time I had an epic mic failure wherein my mic died, the gardener showed up, couldn't get it to work. I found out, by the way, it was a faulty cord. So fortunately, did not have to buy a new mic. But yes, welcome, Justin, to Electric Liberty Land, and thank you for coming back for the second time.
Thanks for having me, Brian.
Feels like we go way back, like we were at summer camp together, doesn't it?
It does.
So once again, do me a favor, go through a little bit of your background, why you came to write this book, because I remember it was a pretty interesting story. My favorite part, just to remind you, because I don't want to be left out, was that you were complaining really was the linchpin for the start of this. It was really the catalyst for this great work.
That's right. So complaining is so underrated. I mean, complaining, it's funny, or at least it can be, and like you learn things about people. I mean, anyway, that's a whole other thing. But I think complaining is great. So yeah, so Brandon and I met at it was actually at the University of Arizona, not Arizona State.
Son of
I
a
was
bitch.
at Arizona State though at one point, so okay. That's okay. But anyway, so yeah, Brandon and I were grad students in philosophy at Arizona. We would go work out together, and we didn't know each other that well, so we just sort of complained about things. And one of the things that we settled on that was like fun to complain about was people's behavior on then I guess just Facebook mostly. So we would see just like somebody's mom or just some person we went to high school with or whatever, just go on these ridiculous like tirades and rants about politics. And we would just sort of think like, what is this person doing? Like, why do they sound like a corporate press release or like a politician's like very formal, media approved like publicity statement? Like, why are they talking like this? Who cares? And, what we came to think is they are using moral talk as just a device to show other people, like, how good they are, and to get attention and praise for having the right views. And out of this, we constructed, after reading a bunch of stuff in political science and moral and social psychology, we constructed this theory about grandstanding. And what we found over the years, and then doing our own social science even about this, is that this explains an awful lot of people's behavior when they talk about moral issues, and especially about when a lot of that talk gets really nasty.
Yeah, well, we're seeing a lot of that play out. Clearly, election season, which is why it's perfect timing to have you on. I mean, I don't know if you saw any of the Supreme Court hearings for Amy Coney Barrett, but I have not been watching because I view it as virtually I don't know. It's going to be a fait accompli no matter what happens for Trump if he wants to move forward with it. But you are seeing, like, I was looking at Twitter right before, waiting for you to come on, and I saw Cory Booker's out there, and Cory Booker had been a little bit of a grandstander. I think they all are, but I noticed he had his Spartacus moment. People were mocking.
Oh, God, I forgot about that.
Yeah, the Spartacus moment it's hilarious. But now he's up. Same thing. These grandiose statements to show his moral leadership before you get into any actual questioning. So we're seeing that really play out prominently. But I will circle back to that because I want to talk about election season. But I want to lay down the framework and the foundations first for this book. So you came to this. Now, is Brandon, does he operate in the same sphere as you currently? Are you still at the same school, or do you leave him in the dust and then you're throwing him a bone?
Well, Brandon was first, actually, to leave Arizona. So Brandon is at Bowling Green State University now, where he's an assistant professor of philosophy, and I'm at, as you said, eventually Texas Tech.
Eventually, it takes you a little while to get around. I'm just going to name schools until eventually you were like, "That's the one."
Yeah, but yeah, I mean, so we're both in professional philosophy. That sounds weird to say for some reason, but
it really does. It really does.
Yeah, that's what we do for a living. So Brandon is more. You mentioned these confirmation things. So Brandon is way more into like what is going on in politics. I just don't care. I'm completely uninterested. So I mean, like, he's watching this stuff, and so I don't know if this is quite your reaction, but my kind of feeling of this is like, why are you watching this? What you're watching is like filming B-roll for campaign ads for these senators.
Oh, exactly.
Like, no one cares what's going on.
No, they never answer any of the questions. We've seen this with the hearings going on. We see it in the debates that are going on as well. And I did not watch the Harris-Biden debate or Harris-Pence debate. I did watch the Trump one. It's that car wreck. And granted, our listeners also, they won't watch it because they'll listen to our recap. So I have to watch it, live tweet, all that kind of stuff. So I can't escape that. But yeah, I mean, it is fascinating just how much of it's that stay on target. You're bombing the Death Star, and there's only one way for these politicians to get their message heard, and it's by shooting at that little hole, and they refuse to deviate from the target. And you see that with this grandstanding. And so let's go through a little bit. You developed the field guide, as you called it in the book. And, as I'm reading the book, I'm just mentally making check marks because you're seeing this so often now. So if you want to run through, I know there's a lot of them, but maybe hit, the ones you want to hit as far as what are we looking for? What did you break it down as categorically for the grandstanding that we're seeing so often?
Sure. So, just to give you like a general, like, canonical statement of what grandstanding is, because I think it's a term that's misused a lot. Grandstanding on Brandon and my account is the use of moral talk for self-promotion. So it's not just like moral talk you don't like. It's not, people just like, saying things that are wrong about morality. It's not people being hypocrites, although they can be and still be grandstanding. You can also be sincere and be grandstanding. The core of the idea is just you say something about morality or some moral issue, and you do it in order to make people think well of you, to get status, to get recognition. Okay, so what does this look like when people do it? So I want to stress, I'm not telling you every time someone does these kinds of things that they must be grandstanding. It's not that simple.
9 out of 10.
You still have to ask, like, what's actually motivating them, right? So if it's just that, they happen to be engaging in certain patterns of behavior, people might do that for lots of reasons. But nonetheless, what I'm going to tell you is if you set out in public discourse with this goal of seeking status, of making people think well of you, or of people, thinking of you as some kind of moral paragon or someone who should be deferred to, these are the kinds of things you'll do. Okay. So you'll seek out, Twitter pylons, things like this, or it doesn't have to be on Twitter. It can be anywhere where there, people basically, saying, yeah, I think that too. Or, repeating the same attack line with their own like little twist on it over and over again, or posting, once again for the 5,000th time, people in some network, like some statement of whatever.
And the one in the book, you use the example, my favorite is, I agree with everything that's been stated here, but I'd like to add. And you're like, yeah. What are you going to add? You already agreed with everything they just said. Why are you bothering to add anything here?
Right. Yeah. So that's piling on. Related. So a kind of related thing people do is they'll do that. I agree, with what's been said, but I want to go further. And so what they do then is they engage in a sort of moral arms race, or what we call ramping up. So they'll take what's already been said and they'll either say, well, yeah, but I actually feel more strongly about this. Like, I think, racism is not just bad, as this person says, but abhorrent, and
people are very busy in the thesaurus trying to find a word that can one up the other person.
Right. Exactly. And like, so, you can, it's not as if it's never appropriate to be more extreme than like the person who spoke before, or even, maybe that person is just like a lightweight or whatever. But I mean, the point of this kind of behavior is you want to stand out, right? So this is ultimately like not a good way of arriving at a fitting or appropriate position. Another thing that people do is they'll look for kind of exotic moral wrongs. That they'll do what we call trumping up. They'll trump up some moral charge. So one example of this that is becoming, thankfully, I think people are finally getting sick of this, cultural appropriation. Someone will just that's cultural appropriation, or, and this is supposed to be embarrassing or something for the person who does it. And, then people are like, what? I mean, so it's becoming passé in part because everyone knows what it is or is supposed to be, more or less now.
Right.
Like part of the point of trumping up is like, you're basically showing people like, look, I'm ahead of the curve here. Right. Like stuff that other people are overlooking. I notice that stuff and it really bothers me.
Which is kind of an interesting, it's kind of interesting, kind of risky in a way, but I guess it shows you just how desperate people are to get this kind of affection and adoration and notoriety that they'll do these things. But like, if you think, I mean, in the book, they use the example of the girl who went to prom, white girl, I believe she was white anyway, went to prom in the traditional Chinese garb. Which some people would say, well, it's out
traditional Chinese prom dress.
Yeah, traditional prom. Those people had proms for hundreds and hundreds of years before us. Once started in Xi'an, I believe. It's like, the risk involved when you think about it of saying like, I'm going to attack this person. I'm going to attack this high school girl for wearing a Chinese dress. I'm going to destroy her prom. I'm going to try to ruin her life. Is in its at its core, I mean, despicable, you would argue, but also just to think about, the confidence you have to have that you are on the side of right, and then to take that leap and have no doubts that it's going to come back on you, and people are going to be like, you are a horrible person, please jump off a bridge.
Right. I mean, so that was I think it was an Asian guy who did it. If I remember. But you see a lot in identity cases because then it's less likely to blow back on you.
Yeah.
So the idea here is like, you have special knowledge, like you're especially sensitive, or maybe like, I come from a group and like my group has special status to notice this sort of thing. And like it's not that that's not possible. Like, of course, there may be moral charges like that some people notice more than others. But the point is, you can gain status by showing people that you're especially sensitive in this way. So you show yourself, first of all, to be a victim, like you're aggrieved, and people are usually pretty sensitive about victims, that want to be nice to them, and you also show yourself to be like somehow like especially morally knowledgeable or something like that.
Yeah, which is kind of interesting when you look at it, as if a group would be especially elevated as far as their morals or their values or their understanding of something, enlightened, if you would, because of the color of their skin. Maybe some people are, like you're saying, maybe there's people that have been through it that are very well educated, but just to presume that somebody has somehow been bestowed a gift of great enlightenment because they are born a certain color is a little bit insane. And then also, it's like the currency of victimhood is something I've heard thrown about in different academia circles. And you do see a lot of that in this type of thing. This grandstanding of the victimhood plays the first card, and that does garner you a lot of status, I guess a lot of sympathy, but people want to now lead with their victim status as opposed to before where you'd kind of play down, or that was your backstory, but you overcame it and it's fine, and now you want to move on with your life. People don't want to move on anymore.
Yeah, it's a very effective tool. So, I mean, it shields you from criticism, and it gives you a basically a weapon, to wield against you. Like, how dare you, come after me, or like question or disagree with me? Like, I know because I have this special status. So the point of this is just to say that by saying I found some like unusual or like frequently overlooked moral wrong. That I can get something for myself out of it. Let's do one more. So one other thing that's in our field guide of things that people do is they'll engage in excessive emotional displays. So again, let me backpedal.
Screaming at the sky and pussy hats, would that be considered? I mean, I know that's not type, but is that like they're all screeching at the sky? Remember that?
That'll do. Yeah. Actually, yeah. So there's this great video of this. I don't think she has one of those hats. This actually predated that stuff a little bit. Is it Trump's inauguration? This is like my go-to example.
Yeah.
I don't like to accuse people of grandstanding. I mean, for reasons we can talk about.
I just write books about it.
It's like I mean, what is this woman? So this woman is just like sitting on the ground at Trump's inauguration, like just shaking her head, no, and like and at one point she like looks out of the corner of her eye to like make sure she's on camera.
Of course,
like she looks at the camera, and then it's announced that Trump is the new president, and she just lets out this blood curdling scream, like, no, as if like she hasn't had. What would it have been, like 2 months or something at that? Like,
to really process the news.
Yeah, it's just like it's just now hit me, or whatever. Like, I mean, whatever. Like, it's fine. Look, the point is not that you shouldn't be upset about things that are bad, right?
Yeah.
The point is that you can again gain status for yourself by being like the most upset person. Right. And that's a case where I think quite plausibly that's what that woman is aiming to do. So there are all sorts of things that I mean we can talk about this later. But the thing to flag up front is like this is not ideal to have in public moral discourse people just like having the strongest emotional reaction they can whenever it's plausible to have it, just to stand out. As being like especially morally sensitive, because these are supposed to be like signals that are meaningful to people. Like say, oh, whoa, so something like especially bad is going on right now. Whereas instead, all it means is like this person is just like especially like craving attention.
Right, and it seems like I'm seeing a lot of this too. Is we're talking about all these things kind of combined together. Trumping up and piling on, and then this. It almost seems to me that the people that engage in the most moral talk, that really go out of the way to be most involved in it and really put it out there, and like you said, tap into this emotional well of rage or whatever sadness, they are also the most likely to engage in the most immoral talk. As far as, like I'll give an example. A recent example is, Donald Trump gets COVID. And immediately you see the same people that are grandstanding about how they stand for the rights and justice and they want equality and healthcare is a right, immediately saying, I hope Trump dies. So what, do you have thoughts on that? Or do you think that people that are more likely to grandstand are equally on the flip side, the darker side of that coin, also more likely to, I guess, grandstand in the same way, but in the, in a moral or, I don't even know what you'd call it, attack dog kind of fashion?
Yeah, good question. So, I mean, the way I look at this in like the most general terms is, look, there's a conflict between what's true and maybe even what's morally appropriate and what's going to get you recognition and status within your group, right? So it shouldn't be surprising then that people who want to stand out, who are trying to like seem like the most morally pure, will, go right past the point where we're having appropriate moral reactions to like, the things where it's just like, this is the craziest thing I can say, and still like no one's going to outdo this. Yeah. But I will still get credit for it. Right?
Yeah, exactly.
It's like the. It's like, I mean, there's this old Louis C.K. bit that I like to talk about sometimes, where he says, the meal's not over when I'm full; it's over when I hate myself. Right? So the grandstanding is not done when we've reached the truth. It's over when the group is no longer going to be impressed if we go any further. Right.
Yeah.
I mean, even if you think like the group is basically right, like the incentive is not to be right. The incentive is to be the most extreme, like the most like, to stand out.
Ross Ulbricht is serving 2 consecutive life sentences plus 40 years for creating a means for individuals to anonymously make online exchanges using Bitcoin. His actions did not create victims. For nothing more than creating a marketplace, the government locked him up and threw away the keys. Let's get Ross pardoned and get victimless crimes off of the books.
That is the track, #FreeRoss, and you have got to check it out. You don't even have to listen to it consciously if you don't want. Keep it on repeat because it helps the algorithm. And all the proceeds from this track, which talks about Ross Ulbricht, who of course is in prison, as you heard in the song in the intro to this, for consecutive life sentences, simply providing a platform where people can change goods and services voluntarily. Tyler Colford, one of our longtime supporters, a fantastic artist, as you have heard in this track, is trying to help out. He's trying to help out the Free Ross Project. He's trying to help out with Lynn Ulbricht, getting him out of jail, getting him another trial. So, guys, very important that you support this track, that you support what Tyler's doing, and more than anything, you hashtag Free Ross.
Where would you choose, huh? Where would you choose? Where would you choose? Band of the free or scapegoats and sheep? We spent $50,000 a year for each in the clinic.
Yeah, the most out there. Well, I think you're seeing that obviously play out more and more when we got social media, which is so powerful. And, I routinely call it a cancer upon humanity for the most part, because it feels like people are getting more crazy by the day. And, they've had studies where we're getting far more divided as nations in these political camps. And then, and this is something you clearly talk about in the book. You've got liberals and Republicans. And this is where I told you I was going to bring this up last time we spoke. But I do want to take you to the woodshed over the libertarianism excerpt in here.
Hold on. What did we say about libertarianism?
I'm going to read it for you. Okay. Relatedly, the term virtue signaling inspires some to talk of vice signaling. Vice signaling supposedly involves boasting about what a bad person you are. Hardcore libertarians, for example, might vice signal about how little they care about the plight of the poor.
I see.
And then, of course, you drop in Ayn Rand, because naturally. So I just had to bring that up. Like, we're having fun here, but I just wanted to inform you, we don't get together at the libertarian meetings. We don't talk about how we hate poor. We don't want to line them up. These are libertarian solutions are about trying different things and go against the systems. But I wanted to bring that to those.
I don't care about
if any of my listeners read this book, they're going to see that and go, why didn't Brian bring this shit up to him? So,
well, don't be mad about that, people. Look, for however many like smart people there are in like whatever political movement, there are always like 17-year-olds who are just like figuring it out,
of course,
and trying to be like the craziest they can be. So I don't know. Do you want to talk about vice signaling, or do you want to?
Let's talk about. Well, it's kind of interesting. I mean, let's talk about vice signaling because we haven't talked about that yet, and I do think it's an interesting concept. So why don't we talk a little bit about that?
I mean, it's a bad idea, I think. So I mean, look, so people like this terminology, I think, because it's tempting, I think, very often for people to do like a kind of moralizing turn about concepts, and they'll say like, you know, that's not even freedom, like, because it's a stupid thing to do or whatever, or I don't know. I mean, that's not a good example. I'm not going to try to come up with a nice example at the top of my head. But the point is, I mean, look, you can talk about virtue. So people who talk about virtue signaling often then want to say, well, virtue signaling is only really that when it signals true virtue. So then you might, on the other hand, though, say like, well, it's not as if the people who are bad don't signal themselves. They have their own signaling, and what they do is signal that they have these very bad values, right? Yeah. So I mean, you can see where this is going, right?
It plays onto each other. I mean, for sure, without a doubt. I mean, I would give an example of vice signaling. You know, again, it's all tongue in cheek, but you know, we drink a lot on our show. We've got, you know, and we'll make passing references to drug usage or drinking too much and falling down and vomiting, all this sort of thing. You know, it's for fun, but you still make those. You do your little vice signaling to try to play it up and show you're badass. Well, so hang on, so hip.
So I want to understand that kind of talk as like you're actually just talking about the values of the in-group. You're like, we're like people who like to have fun, right? And like drinking drugs kick ass. Like that's fun stuff. That you're not saying like this is immoral or whatever, and like we like that. Or I mean, you're talking about values that you approve of, right? I mean, the reason we don't like this vice signaling talk is that you then will just end up with these disputes, and you know you'll arrive at a place where like one man's virtue signaling is another man's vice signaling, and that's just a really stupid. Like, so do we really want to have like public arguments about whether something is virtue signaling or vice signaling? Like, I don't think so, right? So this is why Brandon and I said, one of the reasons Brandon and I say grandstanding is a better term, because it's neutral in this way. It's just what you're doing is showing the members of your group that you have their values, right? Yeah. Whether those are like the true moral values or not doesn't matter. Right? So what we want to do is just understand the behavior, and grandstanding is a more like fitting, like less value laden label for the behavior. Anyway.
Yeah. Well, let me ask you this. So, do you think? Because this is something that I'm always wondering, right? We're seeing, I think, more people. Like my wife, for example, deleted Facebook from her phone. I would, if I didn't have like our kind of group that we're involved with, and I for a while I was doing stand-up comedy, so I was running comedy shows on Facebook. But at this point in time, especially with everything going on, it just seems. I log on, I see a bunch of grandstanding, I see a bunch of nonsense, I see a bunch of political posters, stolen from the headlines, as you were talking about earlier, as these press releases that people are putting out. Every instinct in me says, just get rid of this shit. Just clean house. You're going to be happier as a person. Do you think that people are waking up to grandstanding? Like, is it less effective than it used to be? Are we subconsciously, even if we're not reading the field guide, are we wired where we're like, and maybe has it gone too far? Are we just saying bullshit, grandstanding bullshit? No, or is there some hope? Like, where do you think we're at in researching this and just kind of what you've been seeing around?
Yeah. Well, okay. So, I mean, there's good and bad news here, I think. So the really bad news is that I think we're just hardwired to do this. So we all think well of ourselves. I mean, about almost every trait. Those of us who are at least not clinically depressed tend to think like we're above average.
And even on that, things. I apologize for interrupting your train of thought, but I didn't think of this before. But it's honestly, even grandstanding even kind of works for people that are just desperately seeking attention and validation. Even those that are clinically depressed, you still see plenty of those on Facebook, trumping it up.
That's right. Yeah.
So anyway, sorry to get you off track there.
Well, no, that's okay. So, but that's just one piece of the puzzle, right? And not only are we self-enhancers in this way, we're especially like bad about self-enhancing about morality. So nobody likes to think like, I'm kind of a slightly below average person, right? You don't hear people saying that. Not only this, we want other people to share this positive impression of us. So we engage in impression management. So, there are studies showing like if you have someone take like a an implicit association test, like checking them for implicit bias about their attitudes about race. If you tell them like you got a really low score and like we're going to release this, to the university, the university community now, people go nuts and they'll like do like ridiculous, they'll like they'll do like fear factor stuff, like putting their
the amount of money Justin's made blackmailing people after doing these tests. That's where the real money in publishing is, everybody.
I don't know how. I know one of the guys who did that study. I keep meaning to ask him like how they got that passed in IRB.
Yeah.
It's pretty obviously a horrible thing to do to someone. But
funny. Good idea for a prank show.
Funny, I guess. But I mean, look, so the point is,
by the way, if you're not surprised, I clearly have a very low moral sense of values. So,
well, I mean, your value is openness. And
well, there you go.
Yeah. So, I mean, look, the point is that there's nothing new about us being like this. We care about what other people think of us. We will take steps to manage what they think of us. And we think really highly of ourselves generally. So, I mean, look, we're just kind of built to grandstand. Now, are people sick of this? Like, I think most people now see, I mean, it's not anything new for people to see through this behavior either, but when Brandon and I started talking about this stuff, we never had anyone say like, I don't know what you're talking about. But we did have people saying, especially philosophers, no one does that. No one ever does that. That's not a problem at all.
Wow.
We don't really have like anyone saying that anymore.
No. Yeah, absolutely not.
Yeah. And we've also done our own social science showing like people admit to being motivated to act this way.
Yeah. Well, I wonder in a way, I mean, you talk about the threat to grandstanding to society, and I want to let you talk a little bit about that, but I want to throw one other thing at you to start the conversation off is, like you're talking about, people really build themselves up. They've got this, their moral understanding of themselves, but then also they like to curate what other people see, obviously. Mm-hmm. And I was just reading, I think over the past 10 years, or maybe it was even less time, the suicide rate among kids, sorry, bringing us down from our laughter here, Brandon, but the suicide rate among kids has like really gone up, substantially. I think it's gone up something like 35 or maybe even higher. And I wonder if, you've got people grandstanding, you've got curating, and then you've got people that are, because everyone else is signaling their moral virtue so hard, right? Whether they actually believe it or not. Do you think that also is playing in, and I know you're not a psychologist, you're a philosopher, but, psychologically, I can't help thinking that all these things are coming together to really damage people and the way, especially young people that are coming up. If you've got this curation, you've got everybody saying how good they are, aren't you eventually going to say, am I the only piece of shit in the room? Like everybody seems that they're really on the ball. They've done these great virtues. Am I the turd in the punch bowl?
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good question. So I'm not an expert in this area. I know a little bit about this. So there's, there's work about like the rise of narcissism and, the relationship between social media use and depression. I think this is controversial among psychologists. There's some work showing that, people who are really active social media users are more likely to be depressed. And one reason for that very well might be that they're looking at these idealized pictures of other people's lives and they're feeling like they can't compete, they can't keep up with this. And so, if that's right, then you can see why this behavior would be really bad for you, bad for your self-esteem, because you think like, oh man, all these other people are just so like morally good, like. But in my heart of hearts, I'm not sure if I'm, if I'm quite that good. So if that's true, then that's really sad.
I definitely think there's got to be some truth to it. Look, one of the things I always get asked for myself is, what's one thing, if we do an AMA, like what's one thing in libertarianism you don't necessarily agree with or you're unsure about? For me, personally, it's air pollution, right? There's no real good libertarian solution to air pollution. And I admit that openly. But there's always certain things where you go, okay, am I doing the right thing? Am I on the right track? Am I confident in this? But at the same time, I will fully admit that I go, I'll grandstand about libertarianism. I'll have to communicate the message, have to maintain my followers on Instagram and grow the podcast and all this other shit. But what worries me a little bit is, clearly, my Facebook friends now probably ignore me or have me muted. But at the same time, there's things that I want to communicate that are important, that do align, that I believe in honestly and truly. And, for example, when we talk about justice reform right now, like libertarians, especially when it comes to police reform, demilitarization, de-escalation, that kind of stuff. And talking about the real causes for the issues in a lot of Black community, breaking up of families and the drug war and that kind of stuff. I'll try to communicate to people, look, we really have been leading the way here. I'd love for you to take a look at what we're talking about and not just write it off. But because of everything else, they probably aren't going to listen anyway, because they know that half the time I'm just rah-rahing. So, I mean, how do we operate? What is truth, philosopher, in this age of grandstanding, and how can we spot it now?
Yeah. Okay, man. So much stuff.
I lay the heavy shit on you, man. This isn't, I'm grandstanding right now by telling you I'm laying the heavy shit on you, giving myself a little pat on the back. I'm making fun for you. You don't want to ask the same questions.
So one way of thinking about this, thinking about just like the, in terms of some of the costs that we talk about in the book. One of the costs is that the social currency of moral talk gets devalued when grandstanding is more common. So one thing is people become more cynical about moral talk when they suspect that other people are using it this way. They think like, oh, well, I mean, I guess maybe if this guy weren't talking about this stuff all the time, I would take this more seriously. Yeah. But it just seems like that, he's every day is like there's like a new person he wants to fight online, or like a new issue or whatever. And it's like, I can't tell what he thinks is really important. So like, what is he as a barometer of like what I should care about? Like, he's really unreliable, or like, it seems like he just wants attention. So like, why would I pay any attention to what he says is, a morally important issue. The other thing is, going back to this idea of excessive emotional displays. So, I mean, take outrage, so like two things can happen here. If you're outraged all the time online, like, first of all, you can't really keep that up, right? So that just like becomes your baseline. Like, your baseline is that you're not actually outraged, because you just cannot be angry all the time. Like, I know like some people will think like, no, I'm special. Like, I really can be angry when it's called. You cannot be angry. Like, not really angry all the time. Yeah. Now, like, you might develop like some kind of, I'm intellectually angry or something like that, but you're not like fuming. And like, there's a difference between being, just like having the judgment, like the world is messed up and like it's really bad, and like, I am so mad I can't even think straight, and like, I have to do something about this, right? So if what you're showing people all the time is, I'm so mad I can't think straight, we got to do something about this, like, you're not actually going to be motivated to do anything. And then the flip side of that is, neither will they, on the basis of what you said, because they can't get angry with you all the time either. So in other words, like, you're all going to end up suffering from outrage exhaustion.
Well, that's what it seems like. I mean, you guys talk about politics in the book, obviously, and that's in the era of Trump. That seems like what we're dealing with, predominantly is the outrage all the time. And, it's from the left, it's just constant level 10, anything he does gets blown out of proportion, and you can't, and it really overshoots some of the major issues you'd like to get, addressed. And then on the other side, again, what you're saying, people are tuning out. So when something big does happen, let's say he actually has a real scandal, then people are going to go, all you do is yell about everything. You were complaining about him, redoing the Rose Garden. It's like, when's the last time you fucking thought about the Rose Garden in your life? To have an opinion in your life, it's like this kind of shit.
Or he went golfing, like,
as if everybody hasn't done that.
Who fucking cares, right?
Exactly.
But the reaction to that shit is the same as like, oh, he basically like lied about.
He's been drowning puppies in the Oval Office's bathroom.
So like, so of course nobody is gonna fucking listen to you when you're like, no, now this is really the thing. Like, of course not. You already blew it. Like, you blew your big, like,
Yeah, you're all caps and all the time. Yeah, and that's where, I mean, in a way, it's almost like the grandstanding concept has bled into media, not just on the left, but on both sides, where just the way in which, so I do public relations for a living, right? That's my career. That's what pays the real bills. And I've seen the evolution of just headlines, and descriptive words, especially not so much in local papers, but, the AP, even in the way the AP writes headlines, is all very much this language of outrage, this language of leading you in a certain way, and it's very inflammatory, where it used to be more matter of fact. So what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah. So I feel like I've noticed this too. I mean, so yeah, the headline, I mean, it used to be really funny to read The Onion. I feel like The Onion is kind of less funny now because The Onion basically made its name like mocking the AP style, right. Having these very, silly headlines, or, and like every once in a while they would have something just like snuck in and there's like a wink, like, here's our values showing through. And like now you see that in the AP, and like The Onion is just like not as funny anymore for that reason.
No, exactly.
Yeah. I mean, so I talked to Jesse Singal, you might know, a month ago or something like that, about how, basically how politics has infiltrated various professions, mine and his. So you read these accounts of what goes on in like the New York Times newsroom about like people trying to get editors fired because they ran an op-ed that, that some people
by
in the
a senator
it's like,
with a valid point of view.
Right. Yeah.
Not that I agree with it, but yeah.
Yeah. And then, they'll run op-eds by dictators of countries.
Right.
Nobody says anything.
Why Cuba is still number one. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and maybe I don't want to get you in trouble, so I won't go too deep into academia. But I mean, I guess you already had spoken with it a little bit. So, what are you seeing there? Just as far as, we don't have to get into specifics, so we can avoid politics if you want, and race issues and all that. Because again, I don't want to get you fired in case.
You won't get me fired. I mean, look, here's what I see. Like, I don't have any problem with people writing about current day moral issues. Like, I do that. I'm a moral and political philosopher. What I worry about in academia is that the incentives now are so strong to come to like the socially acceptable conclusions.
Yeah.
Philosophy used to be like fairly independent. Look, there's no such thing as like real neutrality in this way, but you could actually write an article, defending abortion restrictions, and people would say, "Oh, that's very interesting," and I disagree with this, and there would be people who are upset or whatever, but like you wouldn't get harassed, and
right,
or at least I don't know, maybe you did, but I mean now it's like, why even bother, right? I mean, because the difficulty curve for getting a paper like that accepted is at a journal now is just like, it's like, don't bother, like.
And that's, I mean, it's definitely going to have an impact. I was thinking along those same lines when it comes to research in virtually any field. I mean, there was an example I've used on the show a few times of there's a Harvard professor, and I'm blanking on his name. He was a black professor at Harvard, and he did research into police shootings, and he said it was the most shocking results. But
Roland Fryer.
Yes, thank you, Fryer. And I mean, demonized, and just like people went after him, and they don't want to bother looking at the results. They want to undermine the research, and right. In a broader sense, to your point, how much damage are we doing academically, wherein people aren't going to explore any of these options? It's going to be that very, very thin line of inquiry, and we're going to limit everything that we're doing as far as opening our minds to different options, to different results, and pretty much prescribing, whether it's going to succeed or fail, prescribing one way of acting and just going full bore down, train off the cliff.
Yeah. So, I mean, my real worry is that departments that, were appropriately thought of by the outside world as doing like serious scholarly research, where the conclusion, was actually just whatever was justified by the study, will start, being seen as departments of conclusions, like so many humanities fields, where, and by a department of conclusions, I mean a department where we have the conclusion, like it's fixed, and the game is just about like how we get to the conclusion. So it's, so it would be like gender studies or regional studies or colonial studies or whatever. It's like, yeah, the conclusion is that like misogyny's everywhere. Colonialism is bad, the pieces to really destructive, and so it's just, why would anyone bother reading your work? They know exactly what it's going to say.
Yep.
Right. I mean, and not only like because it's your thing or whatever, but just because in principle you're not open to looking at other evidence that would cause trouble for you. Like,
right. And you worry terrible. Too that it's going to get thrown out. That if they have this conclusion, are they going to be unbiased, or are they going to get rid of the evidence that might go against, or the findings that counter it? I mean, what are your thoughts on? Okay, we have 10 more minutes before an hour, but we don't have to stop at an hour. What are your thoughts about? There was that group. I think it was two men and a woman that created these false papers, and they'd submit them to journals. That it was, pretty fascinating. In gender studies and in all these kind of grudge humanities studies. What are your thoughts on that? Are you a fan of that, or do you think it crosses a line where it shouldn't really be messed with to that extent?
So part of me thinks it's funny, and like part of me thinks like. They deserve, like, those fields deserve it because they're not scholarly and they're not doing good work, and like, of course, but on the other hand, it's like I kind of felt like someone who's obsessed with this stuff can I'm sure like correct me or whatever about some of the specifics, but it just sort of seems like there wasn't a clear like scientific goal in mind with some of this, where it's like, okay, so you wrote something really stupid, and this journal at this field accepted. Like, they sent it to two grad students to review, and the grad students were like, "Well, okay." And some people reported what they wrote in the referee reports, and they're like, "Yeah, I didn't agree, but I wanted to encourage them," or what. So it's kind of an enterprise that's founded on trust, and it's not really clear what exactly this shows. But then on the other hand, it's like there's like the nitty gritty of what they did, and then there's like the general thing, which is like everybody knows these fields are bullshit.
Right. Yeah. I guess it was in a way, right? For me, but then it seemed like they were trying to really showcase it, because the papers they wrote were just above and beyond ridiculous. But there's certain exercises. There's this one libertarian podcaster named Tom Woods who will send out excerpts from papers, real and fake. Pick the real ones. But some of them are so insane and just so above and beyond, that get published, that get notoriety, and then are then they're used in different in whether it's teaching or different references on public policy. That's where I appreciate it, is at least it does something to chip away at this veneer of we are impartial and this is what we found. And because when you do a public policy drawing on it, that becomes very terrifying. We've got not lockdowns, but when you've got laws being made.
Yeah,
tell me.
It's a tricky. Sorry, just to wrap up really quick.
Yeah.
It's a tricky thing because it's like the thing that I guess ultimately I think is like, why bother? Because everybody who like actually looks into this stuff knows it's bullshit. So then like, what do you gain by I guess you show that it's easy, or like, anybody can just like make this shit up. Like, I guess that's bad.
I guess revving up the outrage machine, even more.
but then you can also just like look at papers that are published, and like, those are bad enough, right? Like that people like meant sincerely. So I don't know. I guess like in a way it's good that there's any critical scrutiny at all, but I feel like there are things about how that particular thing that was done that. I figured there would be, because I was arguing with a buddy of mine who was he's a doctor, but he was saying that he was uncomfortable with the way they went about it, even if the results do show whatever. So I figured you might have an interesting take. Well, let's talk a little bit about. It's a good way to wrap up our interview here. Is what's to be done? How can we fight this? Do you have a prescription? Doctor of Philosophy, Justin Tosi. What's the script? Yeah. So what you might want to do, like, and I think it's an understandable reaction, is you might want to like look at what we say about grandstanding and like what these people do, and try to like spot grandstanders in the wild and call them out, right? Embarrass them, say you're just grandstanding or whatever. But we think this is just not a good strategy. For one thing, it's not going to work, right? Because then
it just gives them what they want, right?
Yeah, people will just argue that like you're grandstanding or like you just disagree with them or something like that. Or whatever. But I mean, more importantly, you are, as you just said, giving the grandstander what they want. You're turning the talk, the discussion into like whether they really believe, the thing that they said. And they, will just say, look, I'm quite sincere. I assure you, I really am this good, believe it or not. So this is just not productive. And, it makes things even worse. So what you should do instead, we think is not do this yourself. So ask yourself when you're about to say something in moral discourse, am I trying to do good or am I just trying to look good, right? Like, would I be disappointed if I found out nobody cared about me because of what I said? And if you think you would be disappointed, then you should probably just not say it because you're gonna grandstand if you do. So basically, we think people should see this as an occasion to like monitor their own behavior and sort of be the change that they want to see in the world, that sort of thing. The other thing that you can do is just withhold attention from grandstanders. So just don't like their stuff. Don't engage with them. Just, it's that guy again doing his thing. Like, who cares?
Yeah. There's nothing more painful than that. We've all been there. They're putting out, you tweet something and nobody likes it. You're just like, You just do the sad shuffle from like Arrested Development with the sad music that Michael Blumenthal did.
So the hope is that, if enough people do that, this behavior will come to be seen as embarrassing, and people will actually be embarrassed when they grandstand. They realize like, and people knew what I was doing.
Yeah. Well, hopefully grandstanding is like, you look back at your pictures of your old clothing styles in the 90s, my Skids plaid overalls or whatever the fuck I was wearing. Hopefully people do look back at it as, wow, what a dark and idiotic time in my life to do this. But I mean, like we're talking about earlier, what do you think? Do you think we're going to see a rebuke of this, honestly, in your heart of hearts?
I mean, so it's never going to go away completely again because, I think we're just hardwired to do this. But I mean, look, at the end of the book, we have this story about table manners, right? So if you look at advice books from the Middle Ages or etiquette books from the Middle Ages, you'll see, books being written for like grown people who are, need to know how to like appear dignified and everything at court or among their social betters. Like, how are you supposed to act? And the advice is stuff like, don't blow your nose in the tablecloth. Don't gnaw on a bone and put it back in the serving dish. Stuff is just like completely insane that no one would do now. Like probably never had to even be told not to do at least some of these things. So, I mean, what happened? Like, the norms changed. We just got different social norms. They propagated, throughout society. And now people generally don't behave that way anymore. Yeah. There's no reason we can't see the same thing with people's behavior on social media and in public moral discourse. Right. So, as it's become really easy to grandstand, the norms just haven't caught up yet. Right. So maybe they will. And then maybe it won't be so bad.
I hope against hope you're right. Or, I mean, I guess, what is Elon Musk working on something that connects our brains to the internet, right? So it might just be in the future. We'll all be able to read each other's thoughts. And if you're grandstanding, we'll know it in a second anyway.
I think I'll hang my hopes on the norms, but maybe that's
all right. Well, it's each his own. Do you have any final thoughts? Anything, tell people where they can read you by, of course, Grandstanding, I want to read the full title. The Use and Abuse of Moral Talk by Justin Tosi and Brandon Warmke is available from Oxford University Press anywhere books are sold. But anything else you want to talk about? Any other projects, social media feeds people could come and yell at you on?
I mean, Brandon and I are both on Twitter. Brandon runs an account for the book too.
Oh, good.
So if you want to follow any of us or the book, you'll get updates about our research. We've got ongoing social science on this topic. So, everything we've done so far is more or less confirmed, our suspicions.
Excellent.
So we're excited to see.
Always a good thing.
Keep finding out that we're right. So follow us if you want updates on that stuff.
And what's that address at for Twitter?
My handle is Justin Tosi. So it's just my name all run together. Brandon's is Brandon Warmke, I think. If not, how hard can it be to find? And
that's not a common name.
Yeah, the book is Grandstand Book.
Grandstand Book. All right, there you go. Well, and all those links will be in the show notes. You can find those at lionsofliberty.com/episodes/ELL198. So I'll put that all there and a link to buy the book. It's great stuff. What's next? What do you got on the mind? You got another follow-up project plan?
Yeah. So in addition to that social science stuff, Brandon and I are doing some stuff about free speech. We actually have a paper forthcoming about grandstanding and free expressions. We think grandstanding interferes with free expression. And we're also writing another book called Why It's Okay to Mind Your Own Business. So it's a kind of argument against the commencement speech view of morality, that like a morally good life involves, just service and going out there and making the biggest difference you can, or at least donating as much money as you can to solve all the world's problems. And, in response, we said, that's fine. Like, some of that stuff's really great. That's fine. But there are like less sexy things involved in living a good life. You can have a really morally really good life by just taking care of your family, doing your job, helping your neighbors, helping your local community, that sort of thing.
So basically you're telling me you found your niche of your real audience that's going to buy a book, and it's libertarians. And our philosophy of don't hurt people,
I guess,
don't take their stuff.
Libertarians and Christians. I don't know why. I mean,
there's a lot of overlap. Not for me. I am agnostic at best, I would say. Yeah. But I know there's a lot of overlap there.
Yeah, I mean, neither Brandon or I are libertarians, and Brandon is a Christian, but I am not. So I don't know what the deal is, but I mean, hey, we'll take it. We're glad to have anybody care about our stuff.
And on that uplifting note, all right, Justin, this has been a lot of fun. I appreciate you coming on, and it sounds like you're going to be writing about stuff that I would like to hear more about. So I hope you'll come back and join me another time.
Yeah, awesome, sounds great, man.
Fantastic. Well, again, that'll wrap up this episode of Electric Liberty Land, everybody. So from me, Brian McWilliams, not necessarily from Justin Tosi, but I'll wrap him into this. From me, from the Lions of Liberty and from Electric Liberty Land, always stay plugged into liberty.